Welcome everybody to the Vegan Family Kitchen. Live, this is recorded live demonstration of what I call the minimum viable prep approach to batch cooking. There's another video you can watch on my YouTube channel that is a demonstration of my planned and plant-based batch cooking plan. You can check it out. That was a specific menu that I make, so you can download planned and plant-based. It's a 5-day dinner plan, and I actually demonstrate that prep session. That's from about a year ago, I think. And today I'm doing something a little bit different. And I'm introducing you to the minimum viable prep strategy, and also starting to talk about, for the first time publicly, my approach to what I call cascade cooking. And if you want to have the feel for cascade cooking, imagine a beautiful lake, very peaceful, but quite vast, at the top of a mountain, and it's called batching lake. And inside the batching lake, there's all the building blocks that you've prepared. And the lake empties quite beautifully into a little waterfall that tumbles into Monday night dinner lake. And it also moves to the other side here to maybe Wednesday dinner. And some parts of it also tumble all the way down to Thursday. And there's some tributaries, I think they're called, side rivers that flow into some of those lower lakes. For example, Fresh Pasta River might come into the Wednesday lake and feed that lake with freshly cooked components. So you have the batched components, that building blocks that come from the top, but you also have some fresh inputs into the Wednesday dinner. But then the Wednesday lake, that's not the end of it. It cascades down into Thursday lunch or Thursday dinner. And the different components find their path all the way to the bottom, which is Friday night bits and bobs dinner, where everything that's left gets cooked into one meal. That's always interesting. And all this is improvised based on the 3 main forms of dishes: soups and stews, salads and bowls, and stir fries. And if you want to get fancy on Saturday night, that's fine. Go ahead, be my guest. But throughout the rest of the week, you are using the basic techniques to assemble wholesome, tasty, but very simple plant-based, healthy vegan meals. And once the bottom on Friday is empty, once the fridge is empty, you don't have any more containers, it's time to make it rain again in your batching lake at the top. And that's why I recommend having 60 to 90-minute batch cooking session on Sundays. This is not for you if you really enjoy cooking, and when you come home from work at the end of the day, you feel like cooking dinner would be something relaxing, and you're perfectly happy to decide what's for dinner and cook something from scratch all the time. Then don't take my cascade cooking approach. That's probably not for you. However, in most people's lives, having that simple yet just slightly planned, having that thoughtfulness applied to how you approach batch cooking will make a huge difference. And I'm starting to teach this approach as a separate thing in my Plan, Prep, and Relax course that is starting just for the founders cohort. So there's only like 2 or 3 spots left this week. So if you want to know about that, ask me later. But for now, I got to get started because we got a lot of stuff to cook. So that's what I'm going to show you today. What we're going to cook, well, I think it's just me. If anybody can come and help, that would be great. But otherwise, I think it's just me cooking. I'm going to show you cooking some whole grains. I'm going to do brown rice with red lentils. I'm going to roast stuff. So I've already started heating the water for the rice, and I have warmed up the oven. So I'm going to be roasting some vegetables. I have mushrooms, cauliflower, and a zucchini that has had better days. So it will be fine once it's roasted. And while that's happening, I'm going to cook a bean dish in here. And that's going to be, I've decided on curried potato kidney beans too. With, I'm going to use some tomatoes because I had leftover canned tomatoes. So you could use tomatoes from a can, but I had leftover So that's how I decided what to make for this session. I opened the fridge and I thought, what do I have to cook? And also, what will my daughter take for lunches? Because I already had a full fridge of food, but I had potatoes. So I thought she loves potatoes with the kidney beans. It will bring a color contrast. So that will be interesting. And I will add spinach later, but I don't have spinach at the moment. So on the way back from school, from picking up my son, I'll buy some spinach and add it to my thing. I will also prepare a dressing that I will use to make a kale salad, and I'm going to massage the kale live here in front of you. I will be massaging kale and popping it into a container so I can enjoy a bowl later. So I hope that from now already you can see that I can use the brown rice and lentils together with maybe the roasted vegetables. I said I would roast tofu too to make a bowl. So those are components, but later on I can use the brown rice with the curry, for example. So those are two building blocks that will work together. Maybe when I'm actually eating the curry, I can make a salsa at the last minute. So that would be the side river feeding into my Wednesday night meal, for example. And I will have the kale that's already made and massaged and prepared so that it's a lot less stressful to do it on a weeknight. Perfect. So let's get started. With the first step I'm going to take is cook the grains. So I do that first because cooking brown rice in hot water like this pasta method takes about 22 minutes once it's boiling. And while that's happening, I can get other actions on the go. And if you do a batch cooking session, I always recommend starting with a clean kitchen. But what you can do is put your pot of water on the stove, start warming it up, and then your hot water will be boiling by the time you're done cleaning your kitchen, right? And I'm going to make a generous portion of brown rice here. And if you've never seen me do this, this is kind of mind-blowing for some people. You can add a little bit of red lentils to the rice. It adds fiber, it adds iron, and it's just a little bit of extra nutrition. And why not, since you're taking the steps? And if you don't know why I'm doing this, I'm cooking rice, brown rice, following the pasta method, which means that I'm cooking it like pasta in a large amount of water. You may think I'm measuring here, but I'm not actually measuring. I just want to make sure that I'm not making a mess. But I just have about half a cup of red lentils, a bit over 2 cups of brown rice, because that's what I had left. And I'm rinsing the rice like this. So you may have heard already that some kinds of brown rice that were grown in places where they used to have cotton fields can be contaminated with arsenic. And I don't like that because I eat, brown rice at least a couple times a week, every week. And that is why I cook it this way. It greatly reduces to the point of being insignificant the amount of arsenic in the rice. So there we go. And it rinses my red lentils at the same time. So I'm just going to let this, oh, there you go. My water is boiling. So I'm going to transfer this to the water. Try not to drip across the floor of my kitchen. So I have a big pot of water here. There's as much water as if I was cooking pasta, a significant amount of water. Watch the bang. There we go. And the key is to ask your smart friend for a timer. Hey, Google, set a 22-minute timer called brown rice. Oh, a 22-minute timer. She's so lovely. All right, she can run at least 4 timers at the same time. I've never tried to have more than 4, but when batch cooking, I have to say I'm not a big fan of smart assistants in general, but I really appreciate being able to have multiple timers running. I think it's possible to do something kind of like that on Apple devices as well. I'm going to say something in passing. Favorite tool in the kitchen, use wooden, not plastic, right? Wooden instruments, utensils that have a straight edge because it's useful to scrape the bottom of your pot at the same time. So I'm going to leave that here and it will cook like pasta for 22 minutes. Now that that's on the side and happening, I'm going to get started with roasting stuff. And I'm going to be roasting, I said mushroom, cauliflower, and zucchini. So you don't have to. I use very, very small amounts of olive oil when I roast vegetables, and like a teaspoon or so for a whole head of cauliflower. I think it makes a difference. It does enhance the flavors. However, if you've lost the habit, good for you. You don't have to do that. It's not absolutely necessary. And if you're a perfectionist, raise your hand and wave to me. You don't have to be a perfectionist. This is cauliflower. It's going to be roasted. I'm going to butcher it. And I'm just removing the stiffest part at the bottom, the leaves. The leaves are actually not bad to eat. So I'm just like this, doing 2 incisions, removing the stiff base. It's kind of dry, right? And then I could spend my afternoon cutting really cute little florets, but you know what? I can just do this and it falls apart. And if I was going to cook this in a soup, I would just hack it with my knife. But since, see this piece here, I'm not going to cut it into florets, just cut it in half like this. So you don't have to make things perfect. Of course, if you're a presentation maniac and you take a great satisfaction from the aesthetics of your food, yeah, you probably want to be a little bit more careful than I am here, but you have to realize it's a trade-off. And personally, I think this cauliflower looks just fine, even if I hacked it with a knife. And it's always nice to eat little pieces as you go. Or don't keep all the tiny pieces because they burn otherwise in the oven. Okay, so I have, you can see this is the bottle of oil that I've had for about 6 months. I'm using a teaspoon. I'm going to add a tiny bit of salt. That's about 1/8 of a teaspoon. I'm going to add pepper. And whoops. And a little bit of turmeric. Turmeric is super rich in polyphenols and antioxidants. Really, really, really good for us. Just watching the brown rice here. So whenever I have a chance, I use turmeric. It's really nice to have. So I'm just stirring my cauliflower here. And I'm going to pop it on my baking sheet. And I'm using about half the baking sheet to start, and the other half of the baking sheet, you know what? I think I'm going to do just cauliflower and the zucchini. I'm not going to make the mushrooms right now. Not decided yet. We'll see. Because I think I'm going to run out of space. And if I run out of space, I won't be able to do the tofu. Did you notice what I did there? I've cut the zucchini in 4 pieces. I put them side by side. So these are about 3/4 inch pieces, something like that. If anybody has a question, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll probably see it. There we go. If this was a carrot, I would do something similar. Except carrots are harder than zucchini, so it can be a little tricky. There we go. So zucchini's in here. That took about 30 seconds. Another teaspoon oil, another pinch of salt. Apparently the concept is a salt pig, having a salt container on the side, and you can just help yourself with pinches. I prefer to have my container of salt closed like this. This is a little screw top Tupperware kind of thing. Not the official Tupperware brand, but it works great for my purposes. But again, I'm using a teaspoon. I'm not measuring salt by a pinch. Sorry, I don't use a whole teaspoon of salt. Very, very, very rarely. So I'm spreading this here. So this is my baking sheet. As you can see, I don't want to overcrowd. So that's why I decided to skip on the mushrooms for now. If I had more a little more time and I didn't have a live audience, I would probably take another sheet and put the mushrooms on it and pop them in after these guys are done. So you will have to use your imagination. It wouldn't take much longer. And here we go. How long for the roasted vegetables? Let's say 20 minutes to start. And then we'll move them around and decide. Hey, Google, set a 20-minute timer called vegetables. Good. Okay.
What's the temperature of the oven?
Oh, 375.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, roasting 350, 375 is generally what you want to do. Where's my tofu? Oh, here it is. Rarely, very rarely do I use an oven warmer than 375. Very exceptionally, maybe 400, 425 for short times, but it's rare. So when in doubt, if you're just starting to cook this way, or if you've been cooking this way for years, but you haven't noticed, pretty much everything is 350 or 375. And partially you have to know how warm your oven runs because most ovens are not exactly precise, right? I'm moving on to toasting or roasting tofu. So I had this package of tofu that was sitting in water. I've just drained it and I'm not, where's my cloth? There it is. I'm not going to press it really. I suggest you watch my YouTube video about tofu. I love tofu. I love that it has the texture that it has. That's what tofu is for. So I just pat it a little bit drier. But some people, and that is their God-given right, they like to freeze tofu, which changes the structure of the tofu and it makes it more stronger at absorbing the marinade. And personally, I really don't like that. I like tofu because it's tofu the way it is. I like the texture. And so I don't do that. And what I really like is having the outside of the tofu being coated with the flavorful marinade and the inside of the tofu having a contrasting bland flavor and having the differences in colors. I'm not using tofu to mimic meat. I'm using tofu because I like tofu. So if you like tofu to be more like meat, then maybe you want to freeze it. I'm not going to blame you for that. That's your personal choice. What I'm going to do is a super simple tofu dip. If I measured, I would be measuring 2 tablespoons, but I'm not measuring. So I'm just wanting to aim for about the right amount. This is soy sauce. I'm using regular soy sauce. You could use low sodium. This is balsamic vinegar. And I'm going to add blackstrap molasses. It's in a jar because I was at the very end. I was at the very end of my molasses container and I had to transfer it to a jar to get the very last drop. And I'm putting about 2 teaspoons. Not sure. And I'm going to use a fork just to dissolve the molasses and with the soy sauce and the balsamic vinegar here. So I just have a small amount of liquid. You can barely see here, but I don't need more than that. And I'm going to make slices of tofu and bake the whole thing. And I love to have those, frankly, just even as a snack. I put them in my, especially my son's lunch box. And the slices are about the thickness of a chopstick. I'm not sure, is that it's more than a 1/4 inch, 1/3 of an inch. Nobody uses that unit of measure, but that's about what it is. But really, it doesn't matter. You could also, here we go. You could make triangles. You can make strips. You could, I have in the past cut a bigger sheet like this and use a cookie cutter to make little hearts for kids' lunches. You could do anything. It's all good. And I'll bring in my baking sheet. See, as I walk by, I give the rice a stir, scraping the bottom, but nothing is sticking, so it's looking good. And there's 10 minutes left on the rice. So I'm just going to put my pieces of tofu in there and basically just kind of swirl it around to make the pieces of tofu wet with the marinade. What will give most of the flavor to this in the end will be the kale that will go in the bowl, for example. So the kale will have more flavor because of the dressing that I will do with it. But these are going to be really nice to snack on. And yeah, you can use them in a bowl. That's the main use of those little slices of tofu. So yeah, just going easy, not trying to push anything more than it wants to. I really like tofu triangles. Often I do tofu triangles. And by the way, this is firm tofu. Let's talk about tofu. For those who haven't watched my video about it, if you haven't watched it in a while, when you choose tofu, personally, different strokes for different folks, but personally, I much prefer getting calcium set tofu. So the first ingredients naturally will be soybeans and then water. And then the next ingredient I much prefer when it is calcium sulfate. And there's other kinds of calcium agents in there. Calcium sulfate is the most common. That's actually gypsum. It's the same thing. It's food grade naturally. And that is the coagulating agent. That's the chemical that makes the tofu form curds and become solid. And it's a coagulant that's also used to make fresh cheese. So it's not a particularly weird thing. And that is what forms the clumps. And then the clumps are pressed into a mold. And here you go, you have a block of tofu. And the other common coagulating agent is magnesium chloride, also known as nigari. And that's more the Japanese way of making tofu. And though I love the kind of tofu that's in miso soup and agadashi tofu, which is deep fried tofu, it's a gateway to tofu. If you know people who don't like tofu, you have to have them have agadashi tofu. It is quite yummy. It has a lovely texture, but the taste is just a little bit bitter. And I personally much prefer the taste of calcium set tofu. Often, if it's a firm tofu, it will have both. But the key for me is to have calcium be the first ingredient after the soybeans and magnesium be a distant second coagulating agent used. And the other benefit, of course, is that it's a great source of calcium. So it adds calcium to your diet. If you haven't read it yet, please do read my blog post called Calcium for Vegans or something like that on veganfamilykitchen.com. And there's no video yet, but I'll make one sometime. But the bottom line is if you're eating a lot of vegetables, especially green vegetables and beans and nuts and seeds, you're more likely than not getting plenty of calcium already. So how am I doing here? See, I have about 2 tablespoons left of that marinade. I'm just going to carefully pour it on top. There we go. Sorry, I should have turned the bowl towards you. Here we go. Okay, I'm gonna rinse my hand. By the way, in my sink here, I have hot soapy water. And that's after doing the dishes. I did a few dishes over there and I left the hot soapy water so that I can soak my kitchen tools in it. So see, sheet of tofu here. It's going in the oven. And we've been at this for about 15, 17 minutes. And we've got rice, brown rice cooking with some lentils in here that will form the basis of bowls, some vegetables. By the way, the vegetables, yeah, they're good in bowls, but I would also use them as a add-on into any kind of pasta dish. I would have it with quinoa also. That could be good. You can cook quinoa at the last minute. It's actually a little bit faster than brown rice. There's lots of possibilities. How are we doing? There's 6 minutes left on the brown rice. And the next thing to do is the bean dish. So see, I'm waiting on the, oh, I should put a tofu timer. Hey, Google, set a 20-minute timer called tofu. Third timer, tofu for 20 minutes. Thank you. Starting now. starting now. So the tofu is going to bake in there for 20 to 30 minutes. I play it by ear. I will take it out. I will flip a lot of the pieces, decide how much longer I want to keep it. If I keep it in there for just 20 minutes, it will be quite soft still. The longer you cook it up to even 40 minutes, it will become more like jerky, tofu jerky texture. If the slices, of course, are thinner, it will be drier. And if the slices are thicker, then you have more of an inside. You could also do the tofu in the air fryer. That's what I do when I'm cooking tofu at the last minute. And literally, I chop a block of tofu into 3/4, 1-inch cubes with absolutely nothing else. And I pop it in the air fryer. And it's absolutely wonderful. You know, it doesn't need to be complicated to be delicious. Now, moving on to the bean dish. And that is what will take the longest hands-on time here. And you should read, if you haven't yet, my article about how to make soup. And I also go into great detail in my book, my book called Float in the Kitchen, Practices for Healthy, Stress-Free Vegan Cooking. That is not a cookbook. It's a book where I address the mindset of cooking and I give you some explanations about how to cook different things. In particular, as I was mentioning, those building blocks like soups, stews, salads and bowls, stir fries. I also go into great detail into my strategy for cooking grains, whole grains, and some more guidance about how to create meal plans, how to compose balanced meals, and so forth. Onion, okay. I have to say, sorry, I shouldn't hold my knife when I point at people. So chopping onions is perhaps the most important skill you can practice in the kitchen. And the beautiful thing is that you get to do it practically every single day because they're just delicious, nutritious, tasty, sweet vegetables. And if you get good, if you become better at chopping onions, forming a little claw with your fingers like this, make sure you have a knife that is sharp so you don't slip and slide and chop off your knuckles. Cooking will be so much easier. But it's all in the practice. And I know there's always people that ask me when we meet at Cooking Club and elsewhere, is there a gizmo I can use to chop my vegetables instead? And yes, there are. There's different vegetable cutters that maybe make things a little faster. But what is, and that's great if you have like a wrist injury, if you live with arthritis, something like that. But a knife is the fastest thing to clean. There's no competition there. And it's so convenient. And to me, it's not worth the trouble of having a separate tool for this job. I'm adding a tiny amount of salt again here, and I'm going to fetch my trusty cooking friend, Mr. Happy Spatula. Again, straight edge, the stir. There we go. And so the salt breaks down the structure, the cell wall of the onion, and it helps it release its water, which will prevent it from sticking. So that's the first step. What else am I going to add to this bean dish? I'm going to add some potatoes, and the potatoes are the part that will take the longest to cook. And I'm not going to peel them. Potato peels have a lot of nutritional value. Lots of vitamin C. I'm not sure if the vitamin C is mostly in the peel, but these are a little bit dusty. I'm going to give them a really good brush. I have some kind of brush here that I've had for a very long time. It's starting to look a little ratty, but it works. Does not need to be perfect. It needs to be clean enough not to have, obviously, sand, because eating sand is not pleasant, but you're not going to get rid of 100%. And that is a-okay. Voila, shake the potatoes. And I'm going to dice the potatoes So again, here we can do a chopping strategy. So I'm going to make 2 slices. Each slice is about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to do a grid pattern on top. So I'm cutting the 2 slices at the same time. And I have diced potato. I'm not worried too much about how cooked my onion is in there. It's going to continue cooking while I do this. Another good thing to do, and I hesitated for this workshop about the strategy, was I could have done this in the slow cooker, and I could have just thrown everything together in the slow cooker. There's another Google in the house that is beeping right now. Okay, brown rice is done. Stop. Okay, so I'm going to give this a stir. The brown rice is done. The other benefit of cooking the brown rice using the pasta method is that it's not the end of the world if it overcooks by 1 minute. Okay, so you could finish some other tasks, but I'm going to turn this off here and I'm going to taste it to make sure that it's done. I'm pretty confident. Yeah, so the brown rice here is very tender, and I'm just going to strain it into my fine mesh metal sieve and pop it back in the pot. And time is a little bit of the essence because I want it to stay warm. I want my pot to stay very hot while this is happening. I'm not trying to get every single little last drop of water out, but most of it, okay? So I'm happy with 97%. Pop the rice back into the container. And by the way, yes, there's red lentils. I'm putting it back here. This is hot still because it's an electric stovetop, but it is not, like the element is not on anymore. So it's not going to burn at all. There's a question. Do you ever use an Instant Pot? I do have an Instant Pot. I don't use it for batch cooking really, other than to cook my beans. And in the context of teaching, I find that many people get really intimidated by the Instant Pot. And I don't, and we can argue all day long, I don't find that the Instant Pot is really cooking anything faster. The benefit of the Instant Pot is that it cooks things hands off. Once the lid is on, you can walk away and nothing bad is going to happen because it's an electric Instant Pot, especially if it's the Instant Pot brand. I'm not sure about the others. I think there were some recalls, but I really trust that it's going to take care of things and turn itself off when it's time. And that's great. I like that. But for the most circumstances, I end up using the slow cooker. So other than cooking beans, so I do cook beans from dry using the Instant Pot. That's really my main use of it. I do cook white rice. My son loves white rice a lot more than brown rice. He doesn't actually eat brown rice. Little selective, my second born. And so for him, I make white rice. I use my Instant Pot because I don't have a rice cooker. I'm just gonna show you something here. I hope that answers the question. If other people use their Instant Pot in batch cooking, go ahead and share your strategy. Nothing wrong with that. So I'm just gonna show you that at the bottom of my pot, yeah, you can see there's a bit of a golden crust is a strong word. There's a golden layer of caramelized sugars from the onions and from the potatoes that's forming. We're going to deal with that a little later. Currently, there's potatoes everywhere in my pot. I'm going to add one last potato. And this one is smaller. I'm just quartering it. And again, lining it all up. Up. There we go. Oh, there's something I forgot to do. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to use broth in here to cook the potatoes. And I'm going to use broth that I just reconstitute based on hot water and bouillon powder. I'm using my kettle measure. I'm not being too fussy about it. And I'm going to boil the water first so that it goes a little bit faster once I add the broth in there. But I'm letting the potatoes cook a little bit first. And how are the vegetables going? Vegetables have 13 seconds left. What good timing. Let's see in the chat. Can you reduce the gas in beans, and what powdered broth do you use? Is that it? Okay, so the broth oh, stop. Let's deal with the vegetables first before I address your question. Oh, look at this. Beautiful. Oh, that's the problem with cooking with glasses. I can't see a thing. So the cauliflower is starting to get a little bit golden. I strongly advise using hands carefully. Clean hands are just as good as any instrument and much faster to clean. So I'm just flipping this a little bit. I'm going to put it back in for about 10 more minutes. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the vegetables on the lower shelf of my oven and put the tofu on the top so that the tofu can pick up speed a little bit. I have a split oven, so that's why it's so low. Okay, question about the gas in beans. If you have issues with beans and digesting them, my top strategy would be to start very little. It probably means that your gut microbiome is not super used to eating the beans and it's feeling a little overwhelmed with all that wonderful fiber. If you've been eating beans for 10 or 15 or 20 years, it's typically not a problem anymore for the vast majority of people. So the way to have less gas when eating beans is to get used to eating more beans. That is my understanding. I am not a gastroenterologist. I trained as a sociologist, but that's my understanding. And so start small. You can rinse the beans. There's a lot of stories about using asafoetida in Indian cooking. It's not exactly a spice. It's a powder you can use that comes from gum, I think. And you can use asafoetida. You can cook your beans with seaweed like kombu, which also is a source of iodine. So I'm all for that. But I'm not 100% sure about the science backing of all those strategies. You will find out what works for you. And I strongly recommend, if you're using beans from a can, oops, that's the wrong thing. Oh, kidney beans, no, I'm good. If you're using beans from a can, you'll probably want to rinse them as well to remove some of the cooking liquid. That will get rid of some of the chemicals that will make you more gassy. But the bottom line is you got to get used to it. And also, maybe I will cut this out of the recording in the end. I don't know. Let's talk about farts. There's a section about farts in my book. But the bottom line is if you don't have rotting flesh inside your gastrointestinal tract, if you're not eating meat and dairy products and eggs, your farts won't smell that bad. And you can just get used to the noise. So get used to it. If it's painful, now you have a different problem. And that's probably something that you need to build your tolerance to. Using my Instant Pot, yeah, that's great. Thank you for chiming in the comment, guys. I appreciate it. Whoa, it's getting dark in there. I see while I was explaining here. So I'm burning the bottom of my pot. Bad Brigitte, okay? I'm going to show you, whoop, there goes a potato. You can see there's a bit of black at the bottom. So that's not good. I'm turning down the heat. I don't usually cook on this very much up. So I'm going to use broth or water to deglaze the bottom of my pot. Oh, you know, also what I forgot while I was talking to you all was adding the garlic. But I'm just going to start by deglazing because that's kind of urgent. So I've got hot water here. So deglazing, so the glaze is always something sweet, right? And deglazing means adding a liquid to your pot and scraping the bottom like so. Yeah, I've really burnt it, guys. Oh, I hope I didn't ruin my nice creuset on live television. Okay, I'm just adding a little bit extra water here. I'm going to add broth. That was the next question. What broth do you use? I use this brand called Go Bio. That's a Canadian brand. I think Harvest Sun is one that exists in the US. That's not bad. Basically, you have to look at the ingredients and check that it has mostly vegetables and not mostly oil and salt, right? That's really the key. So, oh, Brigitte, bad, bad, bad. I think it will recover. So that slightly burnt area, some of it is sugar, but some of it is burnt. So that is no good. And I'm not going to scrape it aggressively because I don't necessarily want to eat those burnt residue. Okay, so we're not dying yet here. It's all good. I'm going to add some seasoning. So I have onion, I have potatoes. I'm going to add garlic to my curried kidney beans too. So again, garlic, I find that the garlic presses make a lot of waste. I don't like waste very much. I love garlic though. So you don't need to be perfect at garlic. You just need to be good enough. And you mostly need to triple the amount of garlic recommended in recipes. Something in passing about garlic, it's worth it to buy better garlic because generally you use less than what's you'd have to use to get the same flavor if you buy cheap garlic. And also I find that ready peeled garlic doesn't taste like a whole lot. So that's when a skill that I like to promote comes in, which is taking cooking as a form of meditation. Okay, so seeing cooking as an opportunity to be in the moment, to appreciate the ingredients we're dealing with. This is really sticky. That's okay. Here we go. And like, how much time did this take? I mean, I go a little faster because I do this all the time, but if you practice for a year, you're going to get really good at garlic. And I have some news for you. If you think, oh, a year is a long time, well, you're going to be cooking for another 40, 50, 60 years, maybe more. You don't know. So it's worth it to put in the time to develop the skills. And yeah, knife skills are just the top most wonderful thing you can have to save yourself in the kitchen. But yeah, it will take some time. It is 100% certain that this will take you more time than dialing, you know, your favorite pizza place or pulling out your phone to get something from Uber food. And that's okay, because it's really important. Okay, so see, I have my garlic. I'm going to let it rest for just a sec while I get something to grate some ginger. Ginger is awesome in dealing with muscle soreness. So if anybody here likes to lift heavy weights, definitely make sure to get garlic in your diet every day if you can. Apparently, it's more effective if you have it on a continuous basis. It's not something you can take like you would pop an Advil, but trust me, it's way better for you than Advil. I mean, sometimes Advil is necessary, I guess, but it's really not friendly to your gastrointestinal tract. Ginger is. And I didn't peel the thing, I just grated it like this on my kind of microplane contraption. Here, that's $3 from IKEA, and I love it. There's actually a surprisingly interesting selection of cooking implements from IKEA. I can see that my tofu timer has 30 seconds left, so I'm going to pop this in here. I love being able to lift my cutting board. It's light, very convenient. I'm going to add also seasonings, more seasonings. I'm going to add turmeric. You know what? That's about 1.5 teaspoons of turmeric. So I wanted, before we started, before I found out that we had a problem with Zoom, I wanted to grind some cumin. Stop. But I did not have time. So I'm using cumin seeds. It would be better with ground cumin, but such is life. And about 1/2 teaspoon of coriander. I find coriander has a pretty strong taste. You can learn about the different flavor profiles, find the ones you like, and just practice them. I go into some detail, but not a ton, about flavor profiles in my 100 days of Flow in the Kitchen, which is a series of 1-minute emails you can subscribe to. You get 1-minute email every day for 100 days, and you're going to learn a ton about plant-based cooking if you do that. I think it's $12.50 for that program, and it's available on my website. I'll send you a link after when we're done here, and you can learn more. Okay. So, but I do talk about flavor profiles in there. So I've added my seasonings. I will add more broth. I'm just adding hot water. I've put the broth powder in earlier. I'll give it a good stir. So I'll show you what it looks like now. It looks like this. And I'm going to let this cook because the potatoes need to cook. Where's the lid? The potatoes need to cook before I add the tomatoes. I find it less messy this way. So I'm going to increase the temperature a bit. Now there's enough liquid. It's not going to burn again. So we'll see how it goes. And when the potatoes are tender, which should be about 10 minutes, we'll see, I will add some tomatoes and also some red kidney beans to add contrast. And I would normally add spinach, but that will have to wait until a little bit later. Tofu. Anybody are keeping track here? Come on, guys, you have to remind me. Don't forget the tofu in the oven. You don't want to set another fire. So again, I'm going to use my fingers. So I don't know if you can see the tofu has browned a bit, but I like it to be a little drier than that. And it's pretty hot, but you can see how the underbelly of the tofu here is way lighter than the other side. So by flipping it, I will get golden tofu that's a little bit dry on both sides, and it will be awesome to snack on. You could use a thin metal spatula to flip your tofu. That would be perfectly fine. I kind of like having the appreciation for the texture, but you do want to proceed with caution and not burn your fingers. How are we doing? If anybody has questions, now would be a good time to ask them before I get into the kale. You can just unmute yourself. I'm going to give these a stir. So these are my vegetables. I think they look pretty good. Let's have a piece of, so you want the vegetables to be knife tender. You know, the cauliflower needs to cook a little bit longer. So I'll put it back with the tofu. Probably another 10 minutes up. Hey, Google, set a 10-minute tofu timer. So in 10 minutes, I'll take everything out. So here it's boiling. You can't hear it, but you can trust me that it is. And the potatoes are cooking. So in about 10 minutes, the potatoes will be done. So if you've been keeping track, the next step is going to be preparing the dressing. And we've been cooking now for 45 minutes. So that gives me the time to finish off with the dressing. Let's use a container. So this is going to be the dressing for my kale. And I'm just going to make the dressing straight into my salad container. So this is just the glass container. I love, everybody always asks me, I love those containers. They're from IKEA. They're super solid. And the lids are robust, though I would not put them in the dishwasher. But they're really good. And they come in different sizes. The lids are interchangeable. I quite like them. So in a dressing, typically you would have a mixture of oil and vinegar. I'm going to make this oil-free. Oil is not actually necessary. It does add flavor, or it amplifies the flavors, but it's not necessary. I've put about not even a teaspoon of maple syrup because it was the closest. Normally I would start with the vinegars, but I'm adding mustard. Cool thing about mustard, in case you don't know, mustard is a cruciferous plant, which is really good for us and has cancer fighting properties and all that jazz. And the cool thing when you use mustard in a dressing is that it's going to add to the production of sulforaphane. That is a cancer-fighting phytonutrient in the food. So isn't that kind of cool?
What was that you added from that
Oh.
bottle?
This one?
Yeah. Or no,
Mustard.
the other one, the one you just put down. No.
Maple syrup? Oh, apple cider vinegar.
Oh,
Sorry.
great. Okay.
Yeah, not a problem. And I like to have a lot of lemon juice on my kale. And I'm going to remove the seeds here. And the other cool thing about the lemon juice, of course, it's a big source of vitamin C, and vitamin C helps us absorb. Vitamin C helps us absorb the iron from a lot of the other foods like beans and things like that. This is pretty loud. I'm going to just give it a stir, see how it's going. A big part of batch cooking and multitasking like this is to use all your 5 senses and not to look at your phone at the same time. And if you can avoid it, don't do it in public with like 20 strangers watching. It's also distracting, but I'm getting used to it. But it's better to be fully focused on your task. If you're starting batch cooking, this is lemon, obviously. If you're starting batch cooking for the first time, don't try to do what I'm doing here today. That would be a little silly, okay? You want to start easy, you want to start simple. And what you would do for your first session would be just cooking some whole grains. You could do 1 big batch of brown rice, 1 big batch of quinoa. You freeze it for later, some of it. You keep the rest for the week. Whatever you don't eat in the next 5 days, you can freeze. It thaws beautifully, not a problem. Okay, there we go. I've used, I don't know, a little bit more, about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice here. This is a lemon that I've been working my way through for a number of days. It's starting to look a little bit ratty. I'm going to mix this, and that's like, it doesn't really get simpler than that in terms of a dressing. I'm going to add salt and pepper. Oh, I didn't say this at the beginning, but guys, if you're doing batch cooking, put on your cape and put it on the front. You need an apron. When you wear your apron, you embody the kind of person who cooks. And that is super important, okay? It's your identity as the giver of love through food to wear an apron. So go ahead and do it. And by the way, it also protects your clothes, which is nice. When I started the session earlier, before I started, actually, I just flopped a bunch of water everywhere and my clothes would have been wet and very uncomfortable and I would have had to change. I'm adding miso paste here. It's not the miso, it's white miso, but it's not what's on the container. It's miso that I actually made with my daughter when we were in Japan. I learned how to make miso, which was a fun experience. And we've been eating it for a couple months now and we're still healthy. So it was probably right. So it's good to have a little bit of saltiness in a dressing. That will certainly build the flavor. And I've added fresh ground pepper. And you know what else would be nice in this would be some kind of herbs. And I will add thyme, just thyme. You could add basil, parsley, other dried herbs that would be fine too. But in my salad, there's going to be a lot of fresh basil and fresh parsley when I actually make the salad because I have that in my fridge. So I'm not going to go crazy on the herbs here. Okay. Using Mr. Happy Spatula to stir the potatoes. I'm going to test the potatoes to see if they're about done before I add. So see, I just have the spatula, the knife, the microplane, 1 measuring spoon. Yeah, the potatoes are soft enough for me to add. I can even taste one. It's nice to taste the food as you go. Okay, that's super important. Everything in a vegan kitchen, pretty much, can be enjoyed raw or in a low stage of cooking. You don't have to wait until things are fully cooked to taste them. So I can tell the state of these potatoes. They're not yet fully cooked, but they're cooked enough that I'm going to comfortably add tomato. And they're hot. So I'm adding the equivalent of a small can of diced tomatoes. And again, giving it a stir. And I'm going to add the beans as well. I'm just adding a can of kidney beans. If you cook your own beans at home from scratch, more power to you. That's wonderful. But know that you do not have to. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using beans out of a can. And I find these, I usually cook my own chickpeas, my own black beans. I've opened a can of tomatoes, very bad. Where are the beans? Here they are. I cook my own, usually 2 or 3, usually 2 different kinds of beans every week. I save the extra by freezing it. And again, easy to take it out and just thaw them. You can freeze in Ziploc kind of bags at the last minute. They will thaw faster, or you can freeze them in jars. Just have to make sure to use the kinds of jars that don't have shoulders so that they don't break. There we go. So it's starting to get a little messy around here, but yeah. So I'm just going to put my kidney beans that I've rinsed from a can inside my dish. And the dish is a little bit more colored than it should be. Normally this would be a whiter color, but because I allowed it to burn a little bit at the beginning, and I've added a lot of tomatoes. There we go. Then you could do this with coconut milk instead. That would be quite delicious. My daughter, who's going to eat this, is not a fan of coconut, so that's why I didn't use coconut milk. So I'm just going to show you. So far, it looks like this. Okay. Let me check if there's anything in there. You're doing an awesome job. That's so kind, Julie. Thank you. Okay, so what's happening? The tofu is about to beep. So we're going to attend the tofu before we do the final step, which will be the kale. So tofu, I'm not going to use my bare hands to take this out of the oven. How we doing, Mr. Tofu? Yes. You can tell that my oven works harder on the left side because the part of the tofu is a little bit more cooked. Put this here to cool. And the vegetables. So some nice roasted vegetables here. And putting it on the side to cool. And I'm turning off the oven. No need to have this running anymore. Okay, so, or you could do mushrooms if you had an extra few minutes. Stop. Okay, so the last step I was saying was preparing that kale. I have a lot of kale here. That's a bit too much at this time of year. The farmers are trying to get rid of all the kale. I'm going to rinse it, and I'm going to show you my favorite strategy for dealing with kale. So I'm just going to rinse it quickly in the sink like so. Make sure that there's no bug that's caught in there inadvertently or excessive dirt, though that's usually not the case at this time of year. And I'm going to just put my kale in a towel here. Let me show you closer up. So I've wrapped my lovely kale into this towel, and I'm going to roll it and wring it as hard as I possibly can. So if I had been a little bit smarter about planning this session, what I would have done is I would have probably prepared the kale at the beginning. So I'm just wringing it to break down the fibers so it's more pleasant, though just putting it in the dressing and leaving it overnight will make the fibers gentler, easier to chew on, more tender. Here we go. So what I would have done, I would have started this first so that I would have used the kale stems in my dish here in the bean dish. So I would have used the kale stems kind of like some other people use celery, right? But I didn't think about it. I'm just kind of massaging it a little more, breaking it down with my hands. The underside of my nails is going to be green for the rest of the day, but that's okay. I can do that a little faster. Just ripping it, removing the tender parts. I'm going to make a pile here. Preparing the kale. So these are all just easy prep steps. Doesn't need to be complicated. No, the way to keep this way of eating sustainable in the long run is to keep it silly simple, okay? Don't try to cook from recipes every single night. It's too stressful. We don't need to do that to ourselves, okay? If anybody wants to chime in right now, go ahead and unmute and say hi and talk about your simple strategies. So unfortunately for this right now, I'm going to get rid of the stems, but should have used them. Oh, there's another one here. And notice I didn't rip it all off. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to take this in my hands like this. This towel is going in the wash. See all of that beautiful green staining color? That means thylakoids, which are really surprisingly good at making us feel satiated. Okay, oh, I'm just doing a quick chop again, not trying to keep this perfect. And voila. So I've got my kale in here. I'm going to give it just a little mix, but then I'm going to keep this in the fridge and stir it once in a while and flip the container over, and every piece of kale will have been in contact with some of that very simple, delicious dressing. Okay. I will actually add some extra kale after, but for the sake of our demonstration, we've got some kale here. That's done. Okay, so let's recap what we've done here. I hope I didn't, the whole time I've been doing this, not looking at my list. So we did the grains, brown rice with lentils. Let me show you the brown rice. I'm going to fluff it with my big wooden spatula here and show you the rice. And you're going to see that those lentils are practically nowhere to be seen. So if you look at this, this is my brown rice and it looks really delicious. I'm going to have that for lunch. But the lentils are not visible in it. And I'm going to transfer the brown rice to 2 containers. I think I have enough. So I'm going to keep 1 container for the freezer and 1 container that we are going to eat this week. I'm starting to run out of brown rice, which is why I'm doing this. And I roasted those vegetables. Here they are. With the turmeric, just salt and pepper, a tiny bit of olive oil. And those are the vegetables. I'm going to transfer them to another container once they're cool. Roasted the tofu. You can see the difference. The inside is still white. So if I had frozen this, the inside would not be white. It would have absorbed more of the marinade. Now, I like it like that. I've got my stew here that probably has another, I'll let it finish cooking while I do the dishes and then put it away. Let me show you. Oops. It looks like this. I'm going to turn down the heat. So I'm going to turn it down to 1. And I have the dressing and the kale that I have prepared that I just showed you. And I did all that in about 58 minutes, I think, if my clock is correct. So that's a lot of food. I'm also hungry. That's a lot of food. And it was possible because I had this structure. The extra time, because I will have another probably 15 minutes worth of work to put the food inside the container. I will let those containers cool on the counter for a while. If I was going to leave the house, I would probably put them in the sink with ice packs to cool a little bit faster. And even if it's winter, in many places, I leave the containers outside as long as it's not like super, super cold. I can leave them outside to cool and then I can put them in the fridge. Let me see the questions. How long will the kale salad keep in the fridge? The kale salad, there's not very much. So it will It will get eaten pretty quick, but it could keep easily 3, 4, 5 days. There would not be nothing wrong with it. It will get softer and softer as the week goes by, which, if you're talking about dino kale, is kind of an asset. This tofu is so good. I love this. I love calcium set tofu. My favorite by far. So yeah, you got it. This is all the cooking you can do in an hour.